We have ourselves a rematch. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Friday, May 30th, 2025. Vic Morren, Neil Smith. We have watched, including the regular season, there's been 1,392 games, over 1,000 players, 32 teams, and 14 playoff series to date. And after all is said and done, we are in the exact same spot that we were at this time a year ago. And these two clubs, Edmonton and Florida, are the best by far. It's not even close.
The only difference this year is we will now see the advantage be with the Oil and not with the Panthers. So that's the one little difference. We start in Edmonton, and if it goes 7, we end in Edmonton.
There's so much to unpack with this game. So we're going to start with the lineup changes. Mattias Ekholm in on defense for the Oilers. Troy Stecher out. Jeff Skinner in for Zach Hyman. And I think the big surprise from the Dallas side is, considering how strapped they are for offense, Evgeny Dadonov out again. And this time Maverick Bourque draws in. And sure enough, his very first shift, a high stick on Evan Bouchard, and with the Stars looking to at least play ahead. I think they only played ahead 3 times in the entire playoff by scoring the first goal of the game. On the power play, Draisaitl, McDavid, Corey Perry deflection in front at 2:31, and already the Stars are chasing the game.
And this was the first shot of the game at either end of the ice. Was the Corey Perry deflection in for a 1-0 score. The score was 1-0, and the shots were 1-0 for quite a while.
At 7:09, Jake Wallman, long pass to Victor Arvidsson. He gets it off to Matthias Janmark, and it's 2-0. Peter DeBoer at that point calls a timeout and replaces Jake Ottinger with Casey DeSmith. And before we go into the post-game comments, here's a situation where twice Ottinger has been left out to dry. Nobody covering Perry in front, and literally a clean breakaway for Janmark. What's the guy to do?
How did he get between those defensemen and get the breakaway? Like that should never happen. This is a playoff game. It looked awful to me. And then Corey Perry, as you said, camped out in front, tips it by, and then we see Ottinger get yanked.
After the game, DeBoer said, if you go to last year's playoffs, he's, meaning Ottinger, has lost 6 of 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 goals on 2 shots in an elimination game. Who is responsible in front? Who is responsible for not letting Janmark get behind them? So was this a panic move? Is he trying to jolt his team? Well, obviously he is at that point. But boy, you've got a guy that is as high-end as Ottinger, and you're lifting him in this spot in an elimination game for a guy that I think played 1 period in the playoffs leading up to Thursday night's Game 5. That's raising some eyebrows.
You know, I seldom criticize a move a coach makes because I'm not a coach and I haven't been one. And usually when I've talked moves they've made, they've given me very, good reasons for making the moves they made. But this is one that I just don't understand. It looked Mike Keenan-ish. I'm pissed off and I'm yanking the goalie out. Okay, that's fine if you want to jar your team by doing that, but then put him back, because there is no comparison between Jake Ottinger and Casey DeSmith.
58 seconds after DeSmith enters the net, Jeff Skinner scores his first career playoff goal in his second ever playoff game. That's after 15 seasons. 3 goals, 5 minutes, 36 seconds. It's 3-0 Oilers, and 9 different players have already made the score sheet.
And that's how we start the game in Dallas on an elimination game.
Stars had a little bit of life later in the first period. Wyatt Johnston with some good pressure on Brett Kulak. And Jason Robertson scores for his 3rd consecutive game to make it 3-1. And then Thomas Harley had a shorthanded attempt and an excellent stop by Skinner, who, let's face it, the detractors aside, Stu Skinner outplayed Ottinger in this series.
And Casey DeSmith, because he came in for 2.5 periods of this last game, game 5, and Skinner was better than both of them.
Early in the second period, DeSmith had a pretty fortunate stop on a wraparound by Evander Kane. And then we started to see Dallas put on a little bit of pressure. And I thought midway through the second period, they had really their first sustained pressure. Maverick Bork did have some good chances. And Rupe Hintz on a power play at 12:27, right after Skinner stopped a good attempt by Mikko Rantanen. Mattias Ekholm is in the box. Shot deflects in off Kulak's stick. It's 3-2. And you can feel things are starting to turn. But as we saw, not only in this instance I'm going to bring up, but a little bit later in the game, 2 minutes and 1 second after they get to within 3-2, McDavid on a breakaway with an outlet from Mattias Ekholm, and he just blazes down the ice. And if there's any question that Connor McDavid was the fastest player that has ever lived in the NHL, this goal gave you a pretty good indication.
I actually did think that Dallas now had a chance, the energy they'd put in there. But then all of a sudden, Edmonton unleashed a megastar in Connor McDavid, and he went with the speed of a comet and also had the hand-eye coordination to deke the goalie at that speed. And just like when Wayne Gretzky used to do things at certain moments, and just like Mario Lemieux used to do things at certain moments, and Sidney Crosby too, Connor McDavid can turn everything around on a dime.
So it's 4-2 going into the third period, and Jason Robertson gets his second of the game. Kind of a soft goal through Stuart Skinner at 38 seconds. And once again, you get the sense Dallas is going to make this one final push. And then 2:43 after that, Kane is behind the net, tries to center it, goes off Esa Lindell's skate at 3:21, and it's 5-3. And from there, I just saw a Dallas team holding their sticks too tight, passing up shots. The decision-making wasn't there. It was a club that genuinely looked like it was uncertain of its own self.
And I'm sure they were. Just think about it. If you're playing on that team and very quickly your number one goalie is pulled and then the backup gets scored on right away, and then you make an effort to come back. And this Evander Kane goal was him going down the wing, going to go behind the net, and at the last moment it hit a skate and goes in the net. And you must sit there and go, we just have no chance. Every time we think we have a chance, they just squash us.
The Stars got 2 shots on goal in the last 19 minutes. Kasperi Kapanen scores the empty netter, makes the final 6-3. And as I look at this series, and this is something that we're going to pose to Craig Button when we do our Stanley Cup final preview, but I'll ask you now. Did we underestimate the Oilers, or did we overestimate the Stars? Because all three of us picked Dallas in this series.
We did both. We underestimated Edmonton and we overestimated Dallas.
I thought the way they defended, and we've mentioned this isn't a new comment, but the pride that they have taken in their defensive game, that they know that they can frustrate opponents with their speed, with their pressure, and Dallas clearly had difficulty handling the Edmonton speed throughout this series.
Oh, absolutely. Trouble with what to do with Draisaitl, but they had even more trouble containing McDavid.
I want to throw something out to you with the 2 conference final losers, the Stars and the Hurricanes, because I think the difference here is Carolina is a good team. And they play a certain style, which works for them in the regular season and only gets them so far in the postseason because, quite frankly, I don't think they have the personnel to push this over the finish line and get themselves to the final. You look at Dallas, that personnel is there. But every year it seems that something happens to them when they get to this point. This is 3 straight conference final losses, 2 years ago against Vegas, last 2 years against Edmonton. So even though they both go out, the optic of how they go out is very different.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It is very different with Carolina and Dallas. Where did Dallas go? I mean, where were they? They didn't show up. Edmonton's getting from their stars, and they're getting goals from a guy who never played all regular season. Mm-hmm. And they're getting who's in his second playoff game in 15 seasons, and Dallas can't get goals from their best players. Rantanen couldn't get a goal.
So, by the way, if Rantanen had stayed in Carolina, he would have gone out in 5 games either way, I guess.
Well, you don't know what he would have done.
Correct. All right, hard question here. And let's look at head coach Peter DeBoer of Dallas. He has lost 3 straight conference finals and 5 overall, going back to his days coaching the Vegas Golden Knights. He did get to the finals twice, once with the Devils, once with the Sharks. He's got 1 year left on his deal. As a GM, when do you see that a coach has reached his own ceiling with a particular franchise? Because it appears more and more that DeBoer is the ultimate bridesmaid here. And is this team as good as it's going to get under his leadership? Because we haven't had any indication, like with the Hurricanes not being able to push through, there is something in the water in Dallas that everything looks good for the first 2 rounds. They hit that stop sign and they can't get the gas going again.
Yeah, but I wouldn't blame it on the coach for what's gone on in Carolina, and I wouldn't blame Peter DeBoer for what happened in Dallas.
In the post-game celebrations, I think we noticed the professionalism of both of these clubs, because very subdued, let's get on to the final and get this thing done. Interestingly, the Oilers touched the Campbell Bowl after not doing so last year. Panthers treated it in each of the last 2 seasons like it was radioactive. So that's actually become an entity unto itself right now in terms of superstition.
Just a silly tradition. Silly. It's been going on all through the 90s. I don't think it was going on in 94 when we won, but it was definitely going on in 97 when the Philadelphia Flyers wouldn't touch the Prince of Wales trophy. I think it started in and around that time.
Well, Mess had no problem even picking up the trophy and showing it to the crowd, and perhaps that was just another piece of defiance saying, you know what, we're not scared of the challenge that we're going to face ahead. Here's the Prince of Wales trophy, and then we're going to lift the Stanley Cup also.
Yeah. You know how many teams would love to be in the position to be able to hold the Clarence Campbell Bowl? I mean, there's 15 teams that would love to be where Edmonton was last night. So good on them that they touched it. And 15 teams that would love to be where the Panthers were the other night and would be happy to pick up the Prince of Wales trophy. So I think it's all nonsense, but it's all superstition stuff that hockey players always have.
Panthers won both of the regular season games against the Oilers, 6-5, December 16th in Edmonton. That was a pretty wild affair. And then 4-3 down at Sunrise on February 27th. I think you throw the record books out here. These are 2 very different teams playing at the tops of their games. And realistically, this is a final that is setting itself up as good as the one did a year ago. This is going to be the 4th back-to-back repeat of a Stanley Cup final since expansion, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sorry that we have to wait until next Wednesday to get this thing started. I was hoping it would start a day or 2 sooner than that, but once they get going, this is going to be full value.
Edmonton Oilers lost to the Islanders when the Islanders won their final Stanley Cup. They came back and won it in 84. Could this be the same?
It could be. And I'm going to say something here that draws the comparisons of those two clubs is that you had the uber superstar on both Oiler teams, Gretzky and McDavid. You had the 1A superstars in Messier and Draisaitl. You've got the excellent defensemen, but very different in their games in that Paul Coffey, great skater, great playmaker, big shot. Bouchard is known more for his shot. But there are signatures between these two teams that are very similar. And the one thing that I will say from an intangible perspective is that I think that there is a greater motivation to win what you didn't get last year as opposed to defending what you have. That's where I see the potential difference in this series.
Is Glenn Anderson Zach Hyman?
Yes. Reckless abandon? Yes, I would say that.
And is
but
Stuart
Corey
Skinner,
Perry in his spot?
Skinner, Grant Fuhr?
Fuhr made the saves that he needed to make. Skinner is making the saves that he needs to make. But I think you ask anybody who's got the edge in goaltending, nobody's going to tell you Edmonton.
No, nobody is.
I'll tell you something that does intrigue me. The coaching. Because we already know how brilliant Paul Maurice is behind the Florida bench. And how underrated is Chris Knobloch for the job that he has done with this club since taking over from Jay Woodcroft last season, making this team responsible defensively at just the right time without sacrificing the offense.
As I've said throughout the playoffs, we've seen this movie before, and I guess this is a rerun of the same movie.
But will the end be different? Here's the final schedule. In the U.S., all games on TNT, True TV, and Max, and on Sportsnet and CBC in Canada, starting at 8 o'clock Eastern. First two games in Edmonton, Wednesday, June 4th, and Friday, June 6th. Series switches over to Sunrise Monday, June 9th, and then an extra day off in between games 3 and 4. So game 4 will take place Thursday, June 12th, and just a day in between for game 5, if necessary, in Edmonton, Saturday, June 14th. A sixth game would be in Florida, Tuesday, June 17th. And if it goes the distance like it did a year ago, the final game of the season would be played on Friday, June 20th.
June 20th. Imagine they stretched the season out to June 20th.
When the Leafs won their last Stanley Cup in 1967, it was on May 2nd that they won it.
And we thought that was late.
We did. All right, some news around the NHL. We got a few items to catch you up on here. Seattle Kraken hire Lane Lambert as their new head coach. Only Boston and Pittsburgh remain without head coaches. I'm curious on this hire that Seattle didn't go maybe more bigger name, because looking at the resume, what's the difference between Lambert and Dave Haxtell and Dan Bilesma, the first two coaches in Seattle history?
Well, the one difference is that Dan Bilesma's won the Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm. And he's got
that on his resume. He only lasted a short time with Seattle. I'm surprised, and I hear that Lane Lambert's a good coach, and I've watched him, but I've talked to some people that I have respect for that say he's a good coach. However, when you compare his track record with others that are not employed right now, you got to wonder when Seattle is going to go for somebody with a good track record. Their first coach in David Haxtell really didn't do anything superior in Philadelphia.
Right.
Their next coach, Dan Bilesma, Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh. After he got let go in Pittsburgh, he did end up in Buffalo and didn't have a good track record there. Who does?
Yeah.
And then he goes to Seattle and doesn't have a good track record. Lane Lambert's had one other coaching job, and that's when he was assistant to Barry Trotz, then took over for Trotz, actually squeaked into the playoffs that year, and then got fired in the middle of the next season. When is Seattle going to go get a guy rather than get these coaches that have no proven track record? And again, I'm emphasizing nothing against Hackstall, nothing against Bilesman's a friend. I have nothing against Lane Lambert. I'm just saying Seattle keeps on hiring guys with mediocre track records.
I want to hit Boston for a second because there were some reports yesterday that the Bruins were ready to hire Marco Sturm as their head coach, and it appeared that it was Sturm and Mitch Love that were the two final candidates. But now Jay Leach's name has reportedly come up in that he actually interviewed for the position on Thursday. So this one apparently is still an open race, but the two candidates now being Sturm and Leach.
Yeah, and Jay Leach has been around for a long, long time.
And new Islanders GM, Matthew Darche, bringing the chopping block out early, dismissing assistant coaches John McClain and Tommy Alberline. Patrick Waugh is safe, at least for now. And also the entire coaching staff for the minor league affiliate in Bridgeport looks like they're set for an overhaul as well. Head coach has already been let go. Bridgeport Islanders, only 4 home wins last season and a 15-50-7 record. So very quickly, Darche looking to make his mark and trying to revamp the Islanders.
There's no way that Darche went in and fired John and Tom. No chance. Mm-hmm. That would have been Patrick Waugh would have been in agreement with doing that. I think he inherited those two guys from Lane Lambert. So it's Darche and Waugh had the chopping block.
Well, whatever the case was, McClain was responsible for the power play, Alberline for the penalty killing and the defense, and the special teams down towards the bottom of the NHL again this season. Other Islander news, Bo Horvat, ankle injury suffered at the World Championship, sidelined 4 to 6 weeks during the course of this offseason. And Jonathan Toews looking to return to the NHL next season. He is 37 years old. He has missed the last 2 seasons, plus the bubble season in 2021, recovering from COVID-19 and chronic immune response syndrome. You remember that he had gone over to India for a detox treatment. So he's 37, but I'd be interested to find out how young he actually feels now that he has been away from the game essentially 3 out of the last 5 seasons.
We got to get him on the show.
I think we do, and I think you have good context to make that happen.
I'll try my best.
And one other note, according to Commissioner Gary Bettman, the NHL draft will be decided on by the teams in coming years. This year, we have the decentralized draft on June 27th and 28th. Fans, players, media will be congregating at the Peacock Theater in Los Angeles, but NHL execs, scouts, and coaches will be doing the draft virtually, similar to the NFL and NBA. It was a great plan to decentralize the draft until they saw the success at the Sphere a year ago.
And until all the teams started complaining, the scouts, the hockey people started complaining. Maybe the owners like it because they don't have to fly everybody to one location and they save a ton of money on flights and on meals and on hotels and so on. But this was this gem for the NHL. It's always been that way. And they used to have it in Montreal every year. Started to move it around, go back to having it not decentralized.
And there's also been some talk of perhaps having an all-in-one meeting for the awards and then the draft and any other league business, maybe even the start of free agency, all in the same area. So this is something that just continues to evolve.
It is no longer 1980 when Graf was at the Montreal Forum.
That's right. Or the Queen Elizabeth Hotel before that, right?
Exactly right.
So, before we leave you for the weekend and we do this day in Stanley Cup history, it's kind of an up-down day yesterday. And the up was the high that yesterday was Mount Everest Day. That in 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay summited the mountain for the first time. So I'm acknowledging that in order to set up what was down. And down is good here because on the very first shot of the day at the inaugural RBC Canadian Open NHLPA face-off TPC in Toronto, Flyers defenseman Jamie Drysdale sinks a hole-in-one. 135-yard first hole, first shot of the day. So it's all downhill for everybody else there because the highlight has already been accomplished with one swing of the club.
That would be like somebody scoring 3 seconds into Game 7. And it's all downhill from there.
Sure is. Your cue, sir.
This day in Stanley Cup history.
All righty. And on May 30th, 2018, the Washington Capitals win their first ever Stanley Cup final game in franchise history. You remember that they were swept by the Detroit Red Wings in 1998. They beat the Golden Knights 3-2 to even up the championship series at a win apiece. After falling behind 1-0, the Capitals got 3 straight goals from Lars Eller, Alex Ovechkin, and Brooks Orpik. Shea Theodore cut the lead to 3-2 for the second intermission, but the memorable save of that series and probably the one play that turned everything around, Braden Holtby with a diving stop on Alex Tuck when it appeared that the game was going to be tied and forced into overtime. Maybe Vegas goes on to win from there, but at that point, Capitals hold on, win the next 3, capture their first Stanley Cup.
And the coach of that Vegas Golden Knights team was?
Gerard Gallant. No hockey this weekend. It's a dark weekend. We have nothing until next Wednesday, June 4th, when the Cup final opens up. So that gives you plenty of time to catch up on some of our other shows that you may have missed. In particular, the Islanders' Doormat to Dynasty, the celebration of their 45th anniversary of their first Stanley Cup that dropped a week ago Saturday. And also all of our shows are on our website at NHLWraparound.com. So please subscribe, like us, and NHL Wraparound will return on Monday with our Stanley Cup final preview. And once again, we will be joined by TSN's Craig Button. Enjoy the weekend. Listen to as much Wraparound as you can.